Welcome to part 4. In this final episode, I'm going to show you how it is possible to acquire property and grow your portfolio without using mortgage finance, without deposits, and in some cases without even having to buy the property at all. It sounds too good to be true, right? Let's find out. On Monday the 15th of September 2008, I turned on BBC News like any other day. The headline was simple: Lehman Brothers bankruptcy. On the screen, crowds of people were walking out of the offices of one of the biggest investment banks on Wall Street. They were carrying boxes and their faces were somber. At first, I thought it was just another news story. But then came the headlines about the collapse of the global mortgage market, the credit crunch. Lenders shutting their doors. I didn't think much of it until I logged on to my property community forum, and suddenly there were posts everywhere from UK investors saying they couldn't reach the mortgage brokers. Their calls weren't going through, emails were bouncing, switchboards dead. At the time, I was working with one of the biggest brokers in the UK called the Money Centre. My broker Kevin always picked up the calls, and if he didn't, he always called me back. This time, nothing. Dead tone. The switchboard was down. My stomach dropped. It couldn't be right. I've spoken to him just before the weekend. Then the news came. The Money Centre had ceased trading, and every major lender, big or small, had closed the mortgage books. Panic set in. I had several deals relying on refinancing to get paid. I was already cash-strapped. Without those refinances, I would be in serious trouble. Yes, I was one of those typical investors who were asset-rich but cash-poor. Days went by, then weeks, then months. I was barely surviving. And it wasn't just me. All my clients were in the same boat. This was Armageddon, the beginning of a global recession. And to make matters worse, I had a newborn baby at home. My son was barely 2 months old. One day, reality hit me hard. My wife came home from food shopping, and she came home empty-handed. I couldn't afford groceries. That was not my finest moment. Imagine that, the property millionaire who couldn't afford to feed his baby. I had two choices: quit and go back to being a pharmacist, or figure out another way. I chose the latter. I asked myself a better question. How can I invest in property if mortgages are no longer an option? When you ask a better question, you get better answers. I spent days and nights on the internet searching for anything that could help, and eventually I came across two ideas that completely changed my life and changed the next 17 years of my property journey. The first thing I found was a quote by John D. Rockefeller, once the richest man in the world. He said, "The key to wealth is to own nothing but to control everything." That line hit me hard. Then I came across an American book by Dove DeRuze called 52 Homes in 52 Weeks. In the book, he explained how he and his business partner acquired one property a week without mortgage finance, using something called a lease option. That was the breakthrough I needed. In the last episode, I talked about the lockout agreement. A lockout is essentially an option agreement that gives you the option to buy a property at a fixed price for 3 months. A lease option works the same way, but instead of controlling a property for months, you control it for years. You fix the purchase price today for 5, 7, or even 10 years. While the value rises, you benefit from all the capital appreciation. And the lease part allows you to rent the property from the seller and sublet it to generate cash flow. It works like owning the property without needing a mortgage. You're essentially taking over the seller's existing mortgage payments using a contract instrument. So the next question is, who would do this? Why would a seller agree to this? At that time, I was one of the biggest generators of motivated seller leads in the UK. For years, I focused only on BMV deals. But BMV deals require equity. Sellers need enough equity to give you the discount. Any leads where sellers didn't have the equity or weren't willing to discount, I threw them away. Thousands of them. Then I realized something. Many of these sellers couldn't offer a BMV because they had little or no equity. They couldn't sell for less. Not because they didn't want to, but because they couldn't. These were sellers who couldn't afford to pay the mortgage, were facing recession, or simply needed someone to take the burden away. Their properties weren't assets anymore, they were liabilities. So I went back to the old leads and asked a simple question. If I could take over your mortgage payments immediately, would you move out, rent a property to me through a contract and give me the option to buy, say in the next 7 or 10 years? The answer, yes, over and over again. I knew I had found something huge. This could solve the mortgage problem. This could unlock deals in the market where lenders had disappeared. But there was an issue. There was no such contract in the UK residential market. No one had ever done a residential lease option. When I tried calling my property lawyer for help, he had gone bankrupt too. I called law firm after law firm, and most of them shut the door in my face. Then finally, I found Mike, a commercial lawyer with 40 years experience, who was about to retire. He understood the concept instantly and agreed to draft the first residential lease option contract for £50,000. £50,000? I couldn't even afford the groceries for my family. How was I going to find £50,000? Most people would have quit, but I didn't. I raised the money. How I did it is a story for another day. But when I finally had that contract in my hand, everything changed. I went back to those old leads. I closed deal after deal. I learned the system on the job. Then I published my first book, Step-by-Step Guide to Lease Options. The first ever book written about lease options in the UK. The book made history because I became the first person in the UK to successfully use lease options to acquire residential property with documented results. And all of it happened during one of the worst property crashes in history. Word spread quickly, hundreds of people came to me wanting to learn. A major global publisher approached me and offered me a book deal, which became my best-selling book, Property Entrepreneur. I launched my training company Wealth Dragons in 2009, and I became the authority in lease options, not just in the UK, but globally. Since then, I've spoken in New Zealand, Australia, Singapore, Malaysia, Dubai, the Czech Republic, Slovakia, and across Europe. Today, lease options are well known in deal-making circles, but they still aren't mainstream. Most buy-to-let landlords have no idea they exist. But here's the truth. Lease options are one of the most powerful tools to control assets without mortgage finance and without deposits. It's a legal arrangement where the seller benefits because you solve the problem today, and you benefit because you can grow your portfolio without the constraints of capital. So let me ask you, if you no longer needed mortgages and no longer needed deposits, how many deals could you do? All you need is negotiation skills, the right contract, and the ability to find motivated sellers. When you have these, the sky's the limit.
So I was able to do a deal in my second month and I was over the moon. It was actually a PLO. So I'm very excited, and then I've done many deals after that.
Okay, and how long did it take you to do your first deal?
It takes me 2 weeks.
I've acquired an extra 6 deals.
Wow.
6 properties since then. So I've got a PLO, 1 PLO, which I completed last month. Also 3 properties that I bought together from the same vendor at almost 40% BMV below the market value.
I've done a purchase lease option. I've done 2 other deals. One is about 32% below market value. The other one is going to be a no money left in deal, so it's about 42% below market value. And then I've got another deal that I'm sort of working on right now as well.
I hope you've enjoyed this 4-part masterclass series. As you've seen, real wealth in property comes from having the right knowledge, using the right strategies, and developing the right skills to execute them. Your circumstances don't define your future, but your strategy does. If this series has resonated with you and you'd like to work with me and join hundreds of my clients who've achieved extraordinary results, just follow me on my Instagram account. The link is in the description below. And DM me the code 888 and I'll reach out to you. Thank you for watching.